Spider-Man, by the late 2000s, had proven to be Columbia's most financially profitable brand. Despite Spider-Man 3 not receiving the warmest reviews in the world, it made more money than both of its predecessors and became the highest-grossing superhero movie of all time, although it would lose that distinction just a year later to The Dark Knight. Columbia were now incredibly eager to continue the Spider-Man franchise with at least one more film, with the possibility of another whole trilogy, all of which Sam Raimi was expected to direct. So, what if they'd been made? Production on Spider-Man 4 would begin in 2008, with James Vanderbilt signed on to write the screenplay. Vanderbilt was best known by this point for his work on 2007's Zodiac. The plan was to bring back Sam Raimi as director, Tobey Maguire in the role of Spider-Man, and Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson. Bryce Dallas Howard was also expected to return as Gwen Stacy in some capacity. It also would have featured some new characters, including Mysterio, played by Bruce Campbell, Black Cat, played by Anne Hathaway, and the Vulture, played by John Malkovich. Now, the plot of this movie seemingly would have seen Peter and Mary Jane are now married to each other. Peter is doing better than ever lately as Spider-Man. However, Mary Jane is kind of struggling to pick up her acting career. She gets offered a new job opportunity in LA, but she's not sure if she wants to accept, since, well, New York and Spider-Man are nigh on inseparable. Now, we'd see that more and more costumed criminals have been popping up since the last film, and we would have actually seen a montage of Spider-Man apprehending Mysterio, the Shocker, Stiltman, Rhino, and the Prowler with relative ease. Now, meanwhile, a man named Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, would buy out the Daily Bugle newspaper, forcing J. Jonah Jameson out of a job. Now, the Vulture would then begin fighting Spider-Man and would actually kick his ass. Vulture would be extremely threatening and would be the most dangerous villain that Peter has ever fought. Peter would then meet Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat, who would be extremely flirty with him and would test his commitment to Mary Jane, a test that he would ultimately fail. Peter would actually cheat on MJ with Black Cat. Now also, Felicia would have been the Vulture's daughter in this version, and she would have initially helped her father with fighting Spider-Man, but she would later betray her father and would help Peter to take him down. Now at the end of the film, things would end on a bit of a low note, with Mary Jane filing for divorce. After learning about Peter's infidelity, she would then move out to Los Angeles, presumably leading to Felicia being Peter's new love interest going forward. The script for this film will go through various rewrites, with both David Lindsay-Abaire and Gary Ross taking shots at it. Now, some versions featured Felicia Hardy playing a movie-exclusive villain named Vulturess, and another would have seen the Vulture be revealed as Mary Jane's father. Now, Columbia wanted to include Kirk Connors turning into the Lizard in this film as well, though Raimi convinced them to hold off on the Lizard for a possible Spider-Man 5 instead. They also supposedly wanted to include Carnage, possibly played by Jim Carrey, but Raimi adamantly refused to include him. Raimi did, however, express interest in having Kraven the Hunter be the villain in a possible Spider-Man 6. Now, a persistent rumor is that Peter's landlord, Mr. Ditkovich, would be revealed to be a retired Kraven the Hunter. However, Raimi's plans ended up being hamstrung when Columbia gave an estimated release date of May of 2011. Raimi started to feel rushed by the studio, and he disliked every script that was presented to him. Columbia were starting to lose patience with him, as the rights to the character would revert back to Marvel Studios if they didn't have a new Spider-Man film in theaters by 2012. So sadly, Raimi decided to leave the franchise in early 2010, and Columbia decided to reboot the franchise entirely. entirely, Raimi would instead move on to Disney to direct Oz the Great and Powerful later that same year. So what do I think of these Spider-Man movies? Well, if I had a word to describe them, I would say messy. I mean, there's so much going on here. So many ideas being thrown around. Black Cat being the Vulture's daughter, MJ being the Vulture's daughter, Vulture buying out the Daily Bugle, throwing in all these, characters as part of a montage. No offense to Sam Raimi, but I'm pretty sure more people would have wanted Mysterio to be a main villain than a C-list villain taken down in a montage. At least in my opinion, I think people would be a little bit annoyed about that. I'm sorry, but I honestly do think people would get kind of annoyed about that. And speaking of annoying some people, I think that taking J. Jonah Jameson out of the Daily Bugle would be kind of a mistake, just because he's such an iconic part of the films. And then you get rid of Mary Jane and replace her with Black Cat in probably the worst way possible. I mean, I guess it makes sense, because I know it does happen in a lot of versions, Peter cheating on Mary Jane, but I cannot imagine Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man doing that. I know he did it with Gwen Stacy, really, but they were kind of broken up, and he was under the influence of the symbiote. Plus, Mary Jane went and did the same thing, so I don't know. But, I don't know how well that would sit, because he would not be under the influence of the symbiote. And I said in a previous video, I think it would work better if Black Cat was in Spider-Man 3, because then he could cheat on Mary Jane with her in that movie, and it would be under the influence of the symbiote. So then, we wouldn't have to be fuck Peter, he's such an asshole, now it could be oh man, Peter, you're letting the suit get to you, and then, by that point it'd be too late, and Mary Jane would be gone. And the reason I'm saying that, because apparently it was inevitable that Mary Jane was going to leave, because apparently Kirsten Dunst wanted out. Apparently she was not going to come back for Spider-Man 4 at first, and then they had to convince her by saying that would be her last movie for sure, which is weird, because then years later Kirsten Dunst was talking about how much she wished she could play her again. So it's I'm hearing conflicting things. Let me know in the comments which it is, or if it's both. If she wanted out then, and then years later she missed the role, or something like that. I don't know, but it sounds like she wanted out then, and now she wants back in. I don't know, but... And something else I should probably mention, I know I've already done a video about this, because I'm sure some of you guys are going to point that out. I know I've already done a video about Spider-Man 4. The reason I'm doing this is because a bunch of you guys asked if I could make a follow-up video about Spider-Man's 5 and 6. And the fact of the matter is that there's not a lot of information out there about those movies, except that they hope for the Lizard to be the villain in number 5, and then they hope for Kraven the Hunter to be the villain in number 6. That's all we really know. I mean, and that Carnage might have been in one of them as well. And not to be disrespectful, but it doesn't sound like enough to warrant a separate video. Not to mention the fact that I was really unhappy with the Spider-Man 4 video I made back in October, because back then, you guys gotta understand, I didn't really want to make that video, because, you have to remember, back then, when I was just getting back into the full-time stuff, I was just doing the Batman stuff and the Superman stuff, pretty much, with occasional, Willy Wonka videos here and there, but, but the point is that, I didn't really want to make Spider-Man videos back in October. I kind of just did it because people kept asking me to, and so I didn't give the original video my full effort, and I brushed over all the behind-the-scenes stuff, and I pretty much just focused on the plot, and, I was left unsatisfied with that video, and I wanted a chance to do it over again. So I hope that this version was a bit better. I wanted to be a bit more detailed with it. I wanted to, be a bit more interested this time around than I was last time. So let me know in the comments down below if you preferred this video to the original, or if maybe the original was great and I'm missing something. Because I watched the original one back before I did this, and I still think it's crap. So, but let me know in the comments down below what you think of the old one and this one, and let me know if you would have wanted to see this Spider-Man 4, 5, and 6. I'd love to hear all about that in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share with all of your friends and all your various social media platforms. And speaking of social media, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Rinzler_Productions, and I'll see all of you guys tomorrow in the next video.